and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analysing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 1st June 2019. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's begin. This news appears on page number 13 and it reads, "Double spend on education, says NEP draft." Now yesterday only, the Ministry of Human Resource Development released the draft of the National Education Policy 2019 and this policy is now available on the HRD Ministry's website and has opened this draft policy for expert feedback till June 30th. So hence, as part of our discussion, we'll be looking at the important points of this National Education Policy. Now this topic will fall under GS Paper 2 under the category of Government Policies and Intervention for Development in Various Sectors as well as issues relating to education. Now this draft education policy of 2019 is based on the recommendations of the Kasturi Rangan Committee which was set up in the year 2017. Further, in line of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which talks about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, the National Education Policy of 2019 envisions an India-centered education system that contributes directly to transforming our nation sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high-quality education for all. Moving ahead, let us look at the focus area or the components as well as the new policy decisions which have been incorporated in this National Education Policy. The foremost of them is the constitution of an apex body known as the National Education Commission or the Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog. Now as per this policy, this Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog or National Education Commission will be constituted and this apex body will be responsible for developing, articulating, implementing, evaluating as well as revising the vision of the education in the country on a continuous and a sustained basis. Now this National Education Commission will be headed by the Prime Minister and the Union Minister for Education will be the Vice Chairman. Further, this commission will have almost 20 to 30 members. The membership of the Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog will include some of the Union Ministers in rotation whose ministries impact education directly. For example, the Health Ministry, the Women and Child Development Ministry, Finance Ministry, etc. Further, the membership will also have a few Chief Ministers of the states in rotation, the Cabinet Secretary, the Vice Chairperson of Niti Ayog, Senior Most Secretary in the Ministry of Education, etc. Now the members of the National Education Committee will be appointed by the Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog Appointments Committee, which will consist of the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice of India, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the Leader of Opposition, as well as the Union Minister of Education. Hence, this Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog Appointment Committee will select the members of the National Education Commission. Further, in line with the National Education Commission, even the state governments can opt for establishing a State Education Commission or the Rajya Shiksha Ayog in their state. But please bear in mind that this is optional for the state and is not mandatory. Secondly, in order to bring back the focus on education and learning, it has been said that the Ministry of HRD will be redesigned as the Ministry of Education. Moving ahead, the next agenda of the National Education Policy is the promotion of Indian languages. Now the main objective is to ensure the preservation, growth and vibrancy of all the Indian languages. Hence this policy states that strong Indian language and literature programs should be set up across higher education institutions in India. Further, all higher education institutions must recruit high quality faculty for at least 3 Indian languages in addition to the local Indian languages. Emphasis on research on Indian languages, literature, education and related cultural areas will also be given a priority and it has been decided to set up national institutes for Pali, Persian and Prakrit in addition to the existing institutions which promote classical Indian languages and literature. Next, a revised national curriculum framework for adult education will be prepared in order to cover at least 5 broad areas, namely foundational literacy and numeracy, critical life skills, vocational skills, basic education, and continuing education. Moving ahead, vocational education has to be made an integral part of higher education in India, because a smooth integration of vocational education into colleges and universities is very important if we want to grow the acceptance of vocational education in our country. Moving ahead, the next point is in relation to the incorporation of Indian knowledge system in the curriculum of education. Now, Indian literature and traditions contain deep knowledge in variety of disciplines, including mathematics, philosophy, art, logic, law, poetry, astronomy, chemistry, medicine, etc. In addition to this, there are a number of excellent and truly scientific and learned scholars in India who are experts in traditional knowledge systems of India in various subjects. Hence, this national education policy suggests that Indian contributions to knowledge and the historical context that led to them will be incorporated in an accurate and engaging manner whenever relevant. Now, the next point says that the education should be imparted in the local language or the mother tongue, and there should be emphasis on multilingualism. Now, language is a medium of expression of the individual, society, as well as the collective culture of an area. Further, the science of child development and language acquisition suggests that young children learn best through their local language, that is, the language which is spoken at home. Hence, it has been suggested that the mother tongue should be used as a medium of instruction whenever it is possible, at least till grade 5th. The next point talks about equitable and inclusive education in our country. Now, achieving an inclusive and equitable education system is very necessary so that all children have equal opportunity to learn and thrive, and so that the participation and learning outcomes can be equalized across all genders and social categories in our country. Therefore, keeping in mind this goal, special education zones will be established in disadvantaged regions of our country, because it is known that there is inequitable development across region, both across the country and even within the states. Therefore, the states will now be encouraged to declare any clearly definable area as a special education zone on the basis of clear social development and socio-economic indicators, and then special emphasis will be provided in these special education zones so as to bridge the gaps which exist in education. Moving ahead, the policy also says that there will be higher expenditure across all components of the education, whether it is increasing the expenditure on the midday meal, or whether it is increasing the salaries of the teacher, or increasing the expenditure on the infrastructure. Moving ahead, the next point states that there will be a common regulatory regime for both the private and public higher education institutions in our country. That is to say, all higher education institutions, whether they are public or private, will be treated at par with one another in the regulatory regime. On the same line, the private higher education institutions will be given the freedom to set the fees for their programs independently, but the fee so set by them should not be exorbitantly high, and the government will put a cap on the maximum fee hike which a private institution can opt for. Hence, this policy aims to check that there is no arbitrary fee hike, especially by the private education institutions. Now, these were some of the main points of this draft national education policy. Please remember two things here. Firstly, this policy is still in the draft stage. Therefore, there is a possibility that a few of these components can be changed in the future. Secondly, this document is a very exhaustive one, and hence all points cannot be covered here. But then, considering the fact that a new national education policy has come out almost after 5 decades, we can expect a lot of news, especially editorials, in the coming days and week on this draft national education policy. So therefore, you can keep all these major points in mind, and the specific points will be dealt as and when they appear in the news. So with this, let's move on to our next news. Now, this news appears on page number 9 and is titled Frame Uniform Civil Code. The context of the news is that the Delhi High Court has issued notice to the centre on a petition seeking framing of a uniform civil code in order to promote unity, fraternity and national integration of our country. Therefore, in our discussion, we will discuss the concept of uniform civil code and we will also look at its pros and cons. And this topic will fall under GS paper 2. under the category of government policies and intervention for development in various sectors. Now, the Uniform Civil Code has been mentioned in Article 44 of the Indian Constitution, which is basically a DPSP. Article 44 reads, "The state shall endeavour to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India." Now, as mentioned, this is a directive principle of state policy, hence it is not enforceable, and it is for this reason that till now we do not have a uniform civil code in our country. Now that we know that uniform civil code has been provided for in Article 44 of the Indian Constitution, let us see what exactly do we mean by a uniform civil code. Now in India, there are different communities which are governed by a different set of personal laws. For example, we have the Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Succession Act, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, and all these acts are applicable for Hindus. Whereas for other religions such as Muslims, Parsis and Christians, all these religions are governed by their own personal law. Hence basically, different religions are governed by their different set of personal laws which are based on their scriptures and customs. Now, Uniform Civil Code in India is the proposal to replace different personal laws of various religions in our country with a more common, uniform or one set of law. Hence, Uniform Civil Code essentially means unifying all the personal laws of various religions to have just one set of secular laws which will deal with these aspects and will apply to all citizens of India irrespective of the community they belong to. Now you all must be knowing that in India we have a criminal code that is equally applicable to all citizens irrespective of the religion, caste, gender or their domicile. However, such a similar code does not exist, especially with respect to personal laws such as divorce, succession, inheritance, etc. Hence, these personal laws are varied in their sources, philosophy, as well as their application. And hence, a major constraint arises while we try to bring people who are governed by such different religions under one roof. Now, coming to the question as to why a need is felt for a uniform civil code. Now, the society of India has been fragmented on various lines in the name of religion, sex, gender, domicile, etc. And there are different laws governing rights related to personal matters. Hence, the application of personal law is very different for every religion. And it is felt that this fragmentation, especially as far as the personal sphere is concerned, this impedes the unity and integration of our country. Moving ahead, let us look at some of the benefit or the pros of having a uniform civil code. The foremost of them is that having a uniform civil code will simplify the Indian legal system. Because as mentioned, for the criminal laws we have one single code which is applicable to all. But when it comes to the personal sphere, we have different laws governing each religion. Hence, if we have a uniform civil code, we will have just one code or one law for all the personal laws like marriage, divorce, inheritance, etc. for all the people in the country. Second, bringing in a uniform civil code will help us to achieve a secular civil laws for our country. Now, these civil laws will be secular because they will be applicable to each and every person irrespective of his religion, gender or caste in an equal manner. Hence, Uniform Civil Code will actually help us to de-link law from religion in our country. Thirdly, Uniform Civil Code will help to create a national identity, therefore will foster the feeling of national integration, because the Uniform Civil Code will help to blur the lines of differentiation between the people, especially on communal and religious line. Fourth is a very important point, and that is the Uniform Civil Code will bring in gender parity and eventually social justice will prevail in our country. Now, India predominantly is a patriarchal society, and this patriarchy is common to all religions across all the spheres. And in all the religions, it is usually the women who is the most oppressed and vulnerable. Here again, you can take the example of the triple talaq. If you already had a uniform civil code in place, triple talaq would not have existed. Hence, it would have brought in a gender parity across all religions in our country. Another example of this is that the introduction of the Uniform Civil Code will promote monogamy among all the citizens of India, including the Muslims, and this will lead to a betterment in the position of women. Further, it will also remove the prejudices against the women which exist in our personal laws, especially that of divorce and maintenance. Lastly, if you look at the big picture, Uniform Civil Code will help to bring in equal status to all the citizens in our country, because now, in addition to having a common criminal law, the people or the citizens of these countries will be subjected to an equal and a common civil law as well. Now, having discussed the benefits of the Uniform Civil Code, let us also look at the disadvantage, or what are the arguments which are presented against a Uniform Civil Code. The foremost of them is that a Uniform Civil Code will be an encroachment on the religious affair and the religious rights of the people. Now we know that Article 25 of the Indian Constitution bestows upon its citizen the freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of their religion. Hence, if the government comes out with the Uniform Civil Code, the government in a way will be encroaching upon the private and personal sphere of a person. The second is that it will introduce state interference in the religious affair of the people. Hence, it will go against the concept of secularism, which is one of the basic features of the Indian Constitution. And the last point is that there are various practical difficulties as well to formulate and implement the Uniform Civil Code. For example, there is an issue regarding the methodology. That is to say, how are we going to select that which rule is good and which rule is bad, because the rules here are based on the cultures and norms of one's religion. Hence, to select what is actually correct and what is actually wrong will be a very biased exercise and might not be fair. And lastly, since religion is a very personal affair of an individual, especially more so for Indians, this Uniform Civil Code is a very sensitive topic, and whenever there has been an effort to implement it, it has been met with stark opposition. Moving ahead, let us look at a few prominent Supreme Court cases on the Uniform Civil Code. Now, when we talk of Uniform Civil Code, the first case which comes into mind is the Shah Bano case. In this 1985 case, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Shah Bano, who had moved to the Apex Court seeking maintenance under Section 125 of the CRPC. The reason was that she did not get maintenance under the personal Muslim marriage laws. Hence, she moved for maintenance under Section 125 of CRPC, which is equally applicable to all citizens. And in this case, the then Chief Justice of India, Y.V. Chandrachud, observed that a common civil code would help the cause of national integration by removing disparate loyalties to law. Hence, the court directed the Parliament to enact a Uniform Civil Code. Further, in another case titled John Velamaton and the Union of India, in the year 2003, the then Chief Justice V.N. Khare again observed that it is a matter of regret that Article 44 of the Constitution has not been given effect to. Hence, he too asked for the enactment of a Uniform Civil Code. Now, another fact which you need to keep in mind is that the Goa is the only state where a Uniform Civil Code exists. Now, the Goa Civil Code is collectively known as family laws, and this was framed and enforced by the Portuguese colonial rulers through various legislations in the 19th and the 20th century. Now, after the liberation of Goa in 1961, the Indian state scrapped all the colonial laws and extended the central laws to the territory of Goa, but made the exception of retaining this family law. Hence, the Indian government did not scrap or repeal this family law, and this family law still exists in Goa, and this is the closest we have of a Uniform Civil Code for any state in our country. Now, lastly, coming to the conclusion or the way ahead, in September last year only, the Law Commission of India came out with a report on the Uniform Civil Code. In this report, the Law Commission said that it is currently not necessary for India to enact a Uniform Civil Code, but rather what is important is that the legislature of our country should focus on creating equality within the community rather than creating equality between the communities. So this essentially means that we should first consider equality within the communities, that is between the men and women of the communities, rather than trying to think of creating equality between various communities. Further, this law report also said that the need of the hour is not a uniform civil code, but rather the proper codification of all the personal laws in the country. The Law Commission said this will bring to light the prejudices in every civil law, and then every personal law of every community can be tested on the anvil of fundamental rights of the Constitution. Further, the Law Commission recommended fixing a uniform age of marriage for both male and female at 18 years of age. Further, the Law Commission also advocated for the compulsory registration of marriage. Moving ahead, the Law Commission recommended that irretrievable breakdown of marriage should be made as a ground of divorce in our country, wherever there is no scope for any kind of reconciliation between the couple. Because recognizing this as a ground of divorce will help curb the false allegation of cruelty which the women usually make against their spouses to hasten the process of divorce. Then the Law Commission suggested that there should be an equal entitlement to property for both the spouses after divorce. That is, both the spouses should be equally entitled to a property acquired after marriage, and if both of them go through the divorce, then that property too should be divided equally amongst both the spouses. Now you should know that in addition to all these points, there were several other points which were mentioned by the Law Commission, and all these points of the Law Commission have been discussed comprehensively in the DNS dated 1st September 2018 by Ankur sir. You can refer to this DNS if you want to know more points given by the Law Commission on Uniform Civil Code. With this, let's move on to our next news. This next news appears on page number 10, and in this article, the author seeks to lay down exhaustive economic agenda before the newly elected government so as to promote the faster economic growth in India. Now, this topic will fall under GS Paper 3 under the category of issues related to Indian economy. Now, the first sector in focus is the agriculture. Here, the author says that the farm loan waivers and subsidy by the government have failed to alleviate the agrarian distress. Hence, in this regard, the government must shift its focus from boosting agriculture production to boosting the farmer's income. Further, the author says that the coverage of the PM Kisan scheme has to be increased to include all farmers without putting any cap on the agricultural holding, and should also include the landless agricultural labourers. The second sector is the industry sector. In this, the author has said that the multiplicity in the labour laws have proved to be a major hindrance to the development of large-scale industries in India due to complexity, higher compliance burden, lack of freedom to hire and fire. Hence, it's high time that India should reform and simplify its labour laws if at all India wants to reap the benefit of the demographic dividend. Further, the author says that there is a golden opportunity before India to take lead in the manufacturing sector as there is an increase in the wages in China. The third sector which the author is speaking about is the service sector. Here the author says that the countries such as USA, China, etc. have taken lead over India by investing in new age technology like artificial intelligence, blockchain, data analytics, etc. Hence, it is high time that India too should make itself future ready by investing in such new age technologies. Hence, in this regard, the author says there is a need to promote and nurture startups through hand-holding and conducive regulatory environment. The fourth sector is that of investment. Here the author is saying that the government should set up an India First Investment Agency which will function under the Prime Minister's office. And this agency should reach out to the Fortune 100 companies such as Tesla and should encourage them to establish their production units in India. Further, these companies should be provided with suitable incentives such as tax reduction. Further, the author has said that the government should also focus on improving the ease of doing business in our country by reducing red tapeism and facilitating easy land acquisition. And last sector which the author is speaking about is that of governance. Here the author has said that the government must expand its coverage of home delivery of services model to include all other government services. which basically means that the government should home deliver all kind of services to the people in addition to cooking gas, healthcare, etc. And this can be done by leveraging the Digital India program. Further, the author says that the implementation of various schemes can be improved if the government gives more autonomy to the field level agencies. Lastly, the author has suggested that the government should have certain kind of rationalization of the government personnel. For example, the government must reduce its recruitment in overstaffed sector such as railways, and at the same time should increase its recruitment of doctors, teachers and police personnel. So basically this was all the author was saying in this article, and he has provided us with a good bird's eye view of all the major sectors in our economy and what the new government can do to improve this sector. With this, let's move on to our next news. This news appears on page number 1 and says that GDP growth has slumped to 5.8%. Now this discussion will form a part of GS paper 3 in the category of issues related to growth, development and employment. Now the context of the news is that the National Statistical Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has released the estimates for the national income for the financial year 2018-19. Let us look at the highlights of this report. Now the GDP growth in the fourth quarter of 2018-19 was around 5.8%, which is considered to be the lowest in the last 20 quarters or 5 years. Further, the GDP growth rate for the full financial year stood at 6.8%. Now the reason which can be attributed for this slowdown in the economy is firstly the decline in the consumption expenditure. Second is the low employment generation. The third is weak private sector investment. And fourth is weak exports due to global uncertainty caused by the trade wars. Hence now it is expected that the RBI may go in for policy cuts in order to boost consumption and expenditure in the economy. Further, this news also said that the government has now decided to release the periodic labour force survey of the NSSO, which it withheld earlier. Now this report has pointed out that the unemployment rate in India stood at 6.1% in the year 2017 and 18, and this was the highest in the preceding 45 years. Now more information on the periodic labour force survey has been attached in your PDF, but in case you want a video discussion, you can refer to DNS dated 1st February 2019, where this periodic labour force survey has been discussed in depth. With this, let's move on to our next news. Now this news appears on page number 13, and the context of the news is that recently the Union Cabinet has decided to widen the coverage of the PM Kisan scheme, and it has also decided to launch pension schemes for the farmers and traders. So let us first talk about the pension scheme for the farmers. Now a new central sector scheme has been rolled out by the Cabinet to provide pensions to the farmer. In fact, it is for the first time since independence that such a pension scheme for the farmers has been rolled out. Now the salient features of the scheme is that it is a voluntary and contributory pension scheme. That is, it is up to the farmers whether they want to join it or not. And in this scheme, even the central government will contribute. Now this scheme is for small and marginal farmers across the country. The entry age for this scheme is from 18 to 40 years. And when a farmer will enroll in this scheme, he will get a fixed pension of 3,000 rupees a month after 60 years of age. As mentioned, the central government will contribute to the pension fund an equal amount as is what is contributed by the eligible farmer. Now an interesting thing about this scheme is that after the subscriber's death, the spouse of the small marginal farmer beneficiary will be entitled to receive 50% of the pension which was received by the beneficiary. But a condition to this is that such a spouse of the beneficiary farmer should not already be a beneficiary under the scheme. Further, if a farmer or a beneficiary dies during the period of contribution, then the spouse will have the option of continuing the scheme by paying regular contribution. Now, a very interesting thing about the scheme is that under the scheme, the farmers can opt that their monthly contribution to this pension scheme can be deducted from the benefits which they are drawing from the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana. So what will happen is that their contribution amount under this pension scheme will be directly deducted from the income they are receiving under the Pradhan Mantri Kisan scheme. So these were the main salient features of the scheme. Please note that more details about these schemes are awaited because the operational details about the schemes have not yet been released. Moving ahead, just on the lines for farmer, a pension scheme has also been rolled out for the trading community. Now under this scheme, all the shopkeepers, retail traders and self-employed persons are assured a minimum monthly pension of 3,000 rupees after they attain the age of 60 years. And in this scheme, only those shopkeepers and self-employed person and retail traders will be eligible whose GST turnover is below 1.5 crores and whose age is between 18 to 40 years. Another prominent feature of the scheme is that the scheme is based on self-declaration and only Aadhaar card and bank account is required. In this scheme as well, Government of India will make matching contribution in the subscriber's amount. Now, in addition to rolling out these two new pension schemes for the farmers and the trading communities, another decision or rather an improvement has been made in the PM Kisan scheme. So now the government has decided to increase or extend the ambit of the PM Kisan scheme. Earlier we know that the PM Kisan scheme was applicable to only those farmers who held land up to 2 hectares. But now the government has decided that all land holding eligible farmer families can avail the benefit under the scheme. This is to say, now there is no cap on the land holding of the eligible farmers. So regardless of how much amount of land a farmer is owning, he will get benefit under the scheme. But this extension is subject to certain exclusion criteria. Now the PM Kisan has excluded certain category of farmers, and these are serving or retired officers in the government sector, including the state level. Further, any pensioner who is drawing a monthly emolument of more than 10,000 rupees. Third is the income taxpayer or professionals such as doctors and lawyers. All three categories of people are excluded from the PM Kisan scheme. Hence, this was all what this article was stating. More information on the PM Kisan scheme has been provided for in the PDF. With this, let's move on to our next news. Now, this news has been taken from page number 12, and this news is saying that the United States of America has reiterated that it will impose sanctions on India if India goes ahead with the S-400 triumph deal with Russia. Now, this entire topic of S-400 as well as USA's CAATSA law has been discussed very comprehensively by Baswa sir in the DNS dated 5th October 2018. So you can refer to this DNS if you want to have information about this news. Moving to the next article. This next news also appears on page number 12, and it says that the United States of America has decided to remove India from its generalized system of preferences. Now this topic of GSP has been covered comprehensively by Mangal sir in DNS dated 6th March 2019. You can refer to this DNS for more information on this topic. With this, let's move on to our practice questions. Now, based on our today's discussion, here is the first set of your prelims practice question. Please pause the video and solve this. We'll discuss the answer after 5 seconds. Question number 1 reads, which among the following employment survey reports are published by the National Statistical Office in India? The first, Quarterly Employment Survey Report. Now this is incorrect. The Quarterly Employment Survey Report is published by the Labour Bureau. Second, Payroll Reporting Data. This is correct. Now payroll reporting data was earlier by the erstwhile Central Statistics Office. And the third, Periodic Labour Force Survey Report. This is also correct. It was earlier released by the NSSO. But now since NSSO and the CSO have been combined into the NSO, so both the payroll reporting data and the periodic labour force survey report is released by the NSO. So the right answer becomes C, 2 and 3 only. Question number 2 is in relation to the PM Kisan scheme. The first, this scheme provides for direct income support only to those farmers having cultivable land up to 2 hectares. Now this is incorrect. Though this statement would have been earlier right, but yesterday only the cabinet has decided to extend the PM Kisan scheme to all farmers irrespective of the size of the land they own. Second statement, under the scheme, the government provides for income support of 6,000 rupees per year. This is correct. Hence, the right answer to this question becomes B, 2 only. Now, here is the second set of prelims practice question. Please again pause the video and we'll discuss the answer after 5 seconds. Question number 3 is in relation to the pension scheme for traders in India. The first statement, it is applicable to small shopkeepers, self-employed persons and retail traders. Now this is correct. Second, it provides for monthly pension of 3,000 rupees after attaining the age of 60. This is also correct. Third, the entire contribution for the pension shall be borne by the Government of India. Now this is incorrect. The Government of India will not bear the entire contribution but will contribute partly and an equal amount to whatever the beneficiary under the scheme is contributing. Hence, the right answer to this question becomes A, 1 and 2 only. Now, practice question number 4 is based on an article which appears on page number 8 in today's Hindu newspaper. And this article is talking about a mountaineer who aims to conquer Mount Kosciuszko in August. So, in this question, you have been given 4 pairs of the tallest mountain peak and the continent in which they are found. The first, Mount Kosciuszko and Australia, this is correct. Fourth, Mount Elbrus and Europe, this is also correct. Third, Mount McKinley and South America, this is incorrect. Mount McKinley, which is also known as Mount Denali, is not found in South America but is found in North America. Fourth, Mount Kilimanjaro and South Africa, this is correct. So therefore, the right answer to this question becomes C, 1, 2 and 4 only. Now, in addition to these 4, you should know that the highest mountain peak in South America is Mount Aconcagua and in Antarctica, it is Winsor Massif. And of course, in Asia, it is Mount Everest. With this, we come to an end for today's discussion. Kindly note, on account of the preliminary CAATSA 2019 examination, which is being held tomorrow, there will be no DNS for tomorrow, that is 2nd June 2019. For all of you who are appearing tomorrow, all the very best. You can have a look at the question for the day.